I want to welcome David Chase from the second cohort of the Garrison Fellows. There's nothing more joyful than being in a cohort and then seeing the new cohort arrive. And yeah, it's just been heartwarming. And so David, welcome. Thank you for sharing and guiding us in this exploration of the living earth.
Barnaby, thank you so much. When I knew that Barnaby was going to be opening with a practice this morning, I was very excited. I always love to be in community with Barnaby and to learn from him. He's just an amazing presence and has been, in the time that I've known him, which is comparatively brief, I suppose, as would be the case with all of us in a cosmic scale, if you want to look at it that way. But nonetheless, he has had tremendous impact on me. And in the time that I have known him, I feel as though I have come to really appreciate what he is and who he is, and I'm just grateful. I'm also really grateful to come to you as a member of the second cohort of the Garrison Fellowship. My background is a lot of work in arts education and a lot of work in especially teaching and learning and issues around learning within arts education and within an educational context more broadly. So that's a lens that I always apply to everything. And when I added and came to understand more about a contemplative lens and a way through which contemplative wisdom could influence and inform the work that I do in education, a whole new level was opened up, which really has broadened my perspective and the horizon that I see. And the people that we're going to be in conversation with this morning are amazing individuals. And they will, I think, bring that sort of breadth and depth that we have been very fortunate to experience throughout this conference. They will definitely enhance and continue to contribute to that. As we go, though, I would like really quickly to give you a little bit of a background of what's happened in the last couple of days. And also, before I introduce our speakers, set the table a little bit about what we're going to be discussing through the course of this morning. And as I do that, I'm doing a little bit of technological housekeeping here, and I think I've got it. So for those of you who have been here the whole time, this will be hopefully a refreshing reminder, and anybody who is new, a very quick overview of what's happened in the last couple of days. We have been on a journey together in what's called the Contemplative Wisdom Transformative Action Conference. And it's been a tremendous honor and pleasure to hear and learn from all the speakers so far. The sessions to this point, Friday and Saturday in particular, focused on this centering of a convergence of contemplative wisdom with neuroscience, social transformation, and a variety of other points of confluence. The panelists, the speakers, the conversation all featured exploration of how individual and collective healing, embodied awareness, spiritual practice can serve as catalysts for systemic change. This dialogue consistently returned to one core inquiry, the way that I have been experiencing this: how to translate inner transformation into outer action that addresses the pressing social, racial, and ecological challenges of our time. So we have come to that point this morning, and we're really going to focus on interconnectedness and an ecological perspective. Some other key themes that we have been seeing: embodiment and the wisdom of the body has been something that's been present throughout these conversations. The interconnection of ecology and the field of relationship, both to us and to the earth. Contemplative practice has been really described as not just an individual pursuit, but potentially an ecological one. There is no interconnection without ecological connection, has been one of the things that was suggested. A return to an earth-based spirituality has been suggested, as well as a recognition of the mutual dependency of humans in the natural world. And ecology, in this sense, became both metaphor and moral imperative throughout a number of these conversations. We also discussed a great deal about the science of awareness and neuroplasticity, racial healing and collective liberation, contemplative leadership and social action, art, creativity, and practice as transformative experiences, community co-creation in the shared field, and across both days, all of this dialogue has revealed a shared conviction that contemplative practice must be integrated with social engagement. Participants across the board have collectively articulated a vision of transformation that's grounded in embodiment, in ecological interconnection, and in relational awareness, such that rather than positioning influence as a retreat or escape or purely individual introspective pursuit, this conference has framed it as a foundation for courageous participation in the world's repair. And we have also foregrounded how self-repair and the care that can come from contemplative practice positions us to participate in that courageous effort of world repair. I think there's a sense that the contemplative path and the path of justice are inseparable. That's been another theme that's been pursued through this conference. And that personal awakening without systemic transformation is incomplete. This entire experience has served as both a sanctuary for reflection and a call to action. I think each of us has been asked to embody this intersection of wisdom and responsibility and to figure out how that works within each of our own individual contexts. So that's a bit of a setting for what we've experienced to this point. I'd like to introduce the speakers this morning. I'm going to give you some brief biographical information. You can certainly follow up on the Garrison webpage for this event. There's more there. But first is Mary Evelyn Tucker. Mary Ellen is the co-director of the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology and affiliated faculty at the Yale Center for Environmental Justice. With John Grimm, she organized the landmark Harvard conferences on world religions and ecology and co-edited the resulting 10-volume series. Her work explores the intersection of religion, ecology, and ethics through projects such as The Journey of the Universe and Thomas Berry, a biography. She has received numerous honors, and her contributions to environmental thought have included multiple honorary degrees and a Lifetime Achievement Award from the International Society for the Study of Religion, Nature, and Culture. Mary Evelyn, welcome. I'd also like to introduce Elissa Epel, who is an international expert on stress and well-being and healthy aging. She serves as a professor of psychology and vice chair in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at the University of California, San Francisco. She directs the Aging, Metabolism, and Emotions Center, where her research examines how psychological and social factors influence cellular aging and resilience. She's co-author of The Telomere Effect and The Stress Prescription, and her work has shaped global understanding of mind-body health and climate wellness. She is a member of the National Academy of Medicine and a leading voice in science-based approaches to well-being. Welcome, Elissa. It's an honor to have you. Mary Ellen, you as well.
So happy to be here.
Wonderful.
Thank you, David.
So I'd like for each of our presenters to take about 5 minutes to say hello, introduce themselves a little bit further, and let us know a bit more about your work. And I'd start with Mary Ellen. Welcome, Mary Ellen.
Mary Evelyn. Nice
I'm sorry, Mary Evelyn. Please forgive me.
It's totally wonderful. Your introductory remarks were special. I'm just reflecting that my grandmother's name was Mary Evelyn, and I'm sitting behind at a friend's house with her ancestral pictures, and I'm beginning with this sense of ancestors, who do inform, support our work over and over again. And this extends, of course, to the human community, but the living earth community as well. So may the ancestors be with us. May the land on which our ancestors dwelled be with us. And I really want to thank, I didn't hear all of Barnaby's session, but I loved what I did hear. And so thank you, Barnaby, and all the speakers that have preceded us. I've been involved with the conference this weekend on interreligious dialogue, so I couldn't join what I would have loved to hear. But, the leaders in this movement of contemplation and action involved in this weekend series, it's just extraordinary, isn't it? We've come such a long way in appreciating the dimensions that David outlined so beautifully, the inner and the outer and the contemplation and the action. So, I feel like this is an addendum building on the work of so many people, John Kabat-Zinn and others from the very, very beginning. And I do want to just say, too, we rely on ancestors and our friends, and I see Reverend Nancy Wright here, and I see Beth Blissman, and I see Elizabeth Ferrero, and these are people deeply influenced by a teacher who I think many of you may know, but I want to put him into the mix, and that's Thomas Berry. And Thomas Berry influenced so many people into a sense of a spirituality of the earth and the need for a new story that would bring us together. So that's part of this legacy that we're inheriting, and which this weekend is also embodying, and futuring. So I would like to begin with a few comments that what's behind us, supporting us, are the ancestors, and their struggles are our struggles. Mm-hmm. And as Gogol said, the Russian writer and thinker, obstacles are our wings. Obstacles are our wings. And David Brower, a great environmentalist, said, persevere no matter what. We are, as has been acknowledged, in probably the most difficult time in human history. And I say that as a 60s person, anti-Vietnam War, civil rights person, and so on. But witnessing the power of the civil rights leaders, Martin Luther King, Jesse Jackson, Abernathy, John Lewis, with the tenacity and courage and conviction from their spiritual roots that we can change things. I went to college in Washington, D.C., where Nancy Pelosi was ahead of me, and so many of us were involved in these demonstrations and protests and so on. But it was a moral and spiritual force that got us the Civil Rights Act in 1964. Without that, we wouldn't have it. And it's my belief over time that it's the moral and spiritual force for the environmental movement that we and many of you have been working on for decades will also make a profound change into the future of our planetary community. That's what's missing. We have the science, we have the policy, we have the law, we have the technology, we have this huge COP conference right now in Brazil, but the moral, spiritual force, this inner contemplation for outer action, is a missing link. And that's why this weekend conference and all the speakers and participants in our collective work is maybe one of the most essential things for our shared planetary future. And there's no future without a shared future, as has been said many, many times. So how do we make this transition? I'm just going to briefly touch on 4 points. So what's behind us and what's ahead of us? Uncertainty, but what's here in the present moment is an extraordinary sensibility, movement, change of consciousness and conscience. And let me just say it in 4 or 5 points. We have now access to deep time, and evolutionary sensibility that our grandparents didn't even understand. An evolutionary story, a journey of the universe, a universe story that gives us a sense we are part of the largest unfolding dynamics that are both physical and spiritual, both geological time and earth time. This expands our sense of how we belong, where we belong. So deep evolutionary time in its physical evolutionary unfolding and its spiritual transformative change. Teilhard de Chardin said from the very beginning, this is spirit and matter evolving over time. This is what Thomas Berry gave us, the sense of a communion of subjects. This is what a new spirituality of the earth gives us. And that is here present. It's on the horizon. Again, it's the most, perhaps, important transformation of our time. And this is the group. These are the leaders right here, all of you, who can make that transition to an eco-spiritual future. Now, Earth time clearly embodies that. If we have a 13.8 billion year deep evolutionary time, we've got 4.6 billion years right here in Earth time. And living into that and realizing where and how we begin and how our consciousness came out of star birth, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So Earth time gives us a sense of belonging to a living Earth community. I'm going to go deep time, Earth time, historic time, and this living Earth community, and then I'll stop. So we've got the Earth time, living Earth community, historic time. We are only 200,000 years old as Homo sapiens sapiens, and we still have to earn our first name, our last name, I should say, sapiens, wisdom creatures, wisdom holders. But we can do this with this sense of inner time and outer commitment. And we can do it especially with this new and ancient sensibility. Indigenous peoples have it. Peoples of Asia and those traditions have it. That the living Earth community, with all of its differentiated sentience of trees, of roots, of plants, of animals, of birdsong, of migrations, of salmon and caribou, we are living in a vibrating, dynamic Earth community. And that will be the basis, it already is, of our new vibrant spirituality going forward. Eco-spirituality and eco-justice, I'll talk about that more later. But let's enter into this new opening to a realization of a living Earth community. Thank you so much. And Elissa, I'm delighted to be with you and learn from you and your amazing work.
Mary Evelyn, thank you so much. Elissa.
Wow. Mary Evelyn, thank you so much. We will be coming back to these concepts that light me on fire, and I just want to be sharing them all over. I'm in a university context, and I think one of the most exciting realizations for me is that when our young adults get even a glimpse of these deep and true ideas that resonate with them, they light up and they feel hope for the future. And so transformation is not a high bar for them. They're so demoralized by what's happening in the world and so open to learning and living what Joanna Macy called active hope. And so that's bringing, you have been, for decades a leader in this. So bringing this knowledge together in this moment, in this forum, and in all of the people that we then touch is just so exciting. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, David, for curating this, and Nicole and Angel. So I feel like I want to explain how I got from being a university professor who studies health to getting to have this discussion with you and David and Mary Evelyn about ideas such as ecological consciousness, which is something that I have been searching for and longing for, and now understand that this ties together so much of what I have been trying to create. So let me just explain a little bit with my path. So for decades, I have been studying stress and trauma and how that gets under the skin to affect the most fundamental aspects of how our cells work, whether we spin down all our resources in our cells or whether we go into restore and repair mode. And so much of this is related to our exposome. What are all the messages in our environment that we are receiving and perceiving? Do they tell us that we are under threat, or do they tell us that we are safe and thus can be connected and can be working on more repair mode than let's say, survival, safety and survival mode. So we have been studying different ways that how stress gets under the skin really leads us to this idea of disconnection, how disconnected we are from how our thinking mind, which is the dominant experience we have in every moment, how disconnected that is from our body, from our intuition, our sensing, our perception, and how disconnected we are from feeling and seeing the connection, the inherent connection with other people, with other living beings, with the earth. So this disconnection syndrome is a health crisis. It is creating our syndemic of all of the behaviors that we grab at to help us cope with feelings of despair, grief, distress. So just as a very basic function, dysregulates our sense of eating, of how much we need to eat. It creates cravings and that kind of quick satiation we get from any drug or any palatable food. So that's where I've been living, is trying to understand how can we help people simply calm down and feel safe and take care of their inner body. And that has led me to discover ecology, to discover nature as one of our biggest natural resources for how we can actually immediately calm down and feel resilient. So there's tremendous, beautiful research at this point from all over the world showing how the human body in nature, without much training needed, just simply connecting with our attention, attunes to nature. And in our body, we have a reduction of our stress response, cortisol, heart rate. In our mind, we actually can shift our aperture and gain a larger worldview, a larger perspective of ourself in the world, just the beauty, the ability to see the sky, the vast landscape. We are attuned to this reality that we are a small being connected to this phenomenal, miraculous earth. And that instant of attunement there's no drug that can do that for us. So the immersion in nature fits into my scientific medical world of health as something now. For example, doctors in New Zealand are writing green prescriptions for people with high blood pressure. The pad says, you must go out into nature 3 times a week, ideally for an hour. That's the medicine. And that helps with their blood pressure. So that was one of my entries into this world, is realizing that the nature that surrounds us, including this urban green nature that we often don't notice, is some of our best medicine. And then the second is the first was how do we calm down? The second is really, again, from a Western reactive state, how do we save our world on fire? And so this immediately brings us to understanding that we need to change and act and wake up and wake others up. And when you live in that reactive world, you realize that's a world of short-term solutions, adrenaline, trade-offs, burnout. So any activist that jumps into action without community support, mind training, the worldview of deep time, of ecological consciousness, will be depleted and will not be effective. And so seeing ecological consciousness as a missing ingredient has led me to develop a contemplative class with really as vast a menu of wisdom leaders from different traditions. So many people who have been part of this conference are teaching in this course where we're trying to help help young adults shift their worldview. Rhonda McGee, who just got on, Nicole Chase, our sponsor, is a teacher with me in San Francisco. So part of this secret sauce of our contemplative education class is connection and introducing ideas that once you see, you can never forget, such as our role in the world, that we actually are active and empowered when we work together. Mm-hmm. So I would say that bringing in, I can certainly share more about our research and the terms we use for community are things like communal self-efficacy, and it will just be wonderful. And we measure these constructs: eco-anxiety, group self-efficacy, and we try to help people move from distress to action. And this is the transition we're all interested in talking about. How do you go from inner to outer? But it will be wonderful to have the grounding of Mary Evelyn's framework of these constructs that she's given us, that I feel like are very precious, and we want to be able to bring them to mainstream. So for me, every day, I think of Thich Nhat Hanh's simple quote that says everything to me: the way out is in. So again, inner to outer action, and not just sitting with beautiful contemplative practice for the necessary but not sufficient calming and being able to see clearly, but then the movement together. And so that transition from going inward and seeing clearly to wise action together is what I hope we can really dive into.
Oh, that's beautiful. Elissa, thank you so much. So my game plan here for the rest of the time is to just gently move from Mary Evelyn to Elissa and keep this conversation kind of rolling, because there's so much on the table right now that I could easily just freak out and ask a million things and go in different directions, because I am amazed with what we've got on the table here so far. But what I do want to do is introduce a quick metaphor of old wine in new bottles. This is something that's always been really interesting to me, and what I think I'm interested in hearing about that as it connects to both of your work is the notion that there is an ineffable sort of, I don't know, lowercase truth or certain things that we have discovered that have always sort of been available in some way to us, that we are now rediscovering. And frankly, the new bottle part, in my view, is that the more we learn about neuroscience and about the connection of ecology to human evolution and to our place on this planet, the more we realize how accurate many wisdom traditions that are eons old actually have turned out to be. So Mary Evelyn, I'd like to turn to you and ask a bit more about this notion of the ecological consciousness, Thomas Berry's idea of spirituality in the earth. We had a conversation once where I heard Mary Evelyn describe the earth, and along with Thomas Berry's thinking, as rooted in nature's fecundity and balance, and suggestive of an expansion of this science of interconnection to include an ecology of interconnection. So take what you will of that, Mary Evelyn, and love to hear from you, and leave the rest behind, but whatever you'd like to go in that direction with, please do.
Thank you. Wow, a beautiful question, and where to begin? I do want to say, as Beth Blissman kindly put into the chat, it is Thomas Berry's 111th birthday today.
Wow.
So we are celebrating an amazing event. And he, well, just to begin briefly with him, we studied the world's religions, John and I, at Fordham with him. He had a history of religions program, bar none. And we've had many experiences at universities across this country, because he did not only the texts and traditions and languages and so on, but he did the spiritual depths of these traditions in a time when Asian religions were barely taught and indigenous traditions were way on the horizon. But he taught the first classes in Native American traditions at Barnard and at Fordham and so on in 1975, and it was standing room only. So he had an intuition, you could say, and the study of the history of religions that brought forward for us this profound sensibility that, on the one hand, you might say, the symbol systems of the world's religions are very much nature-based. If you take one of the most universal of death and birth and rebirth, etc., that is a nature-based symbol system that's profound in Christianity, clearly, but in many of the world's religions. So Mircea Eliade at the University of Chicago used to say, once we recover the nature base of our symbol systems in the culture and religions around the world, we will have a way forward. It's a very profound insight and still to be done. So partly inspired by those ideas of Thomas and Mircea Eliade and others, we did this conference series at Harvard in the mid-90s against great odds in an institution of great complexity, very anthropocentric, very filled with its own self-importance, clearly, and there's so many stories to tell, and all of you have your stories of obstacles and yet opportunities. So we were trying to retrieve, reevaluate, and reconstruct what are the nature-based teachings, ceremonies, rites, rituals of the world's religions, and how can that help in the reconstruction of ecological ethics and ecological spirituality for our time. And the overwhelming support from historians of religions, from theologians, from environmentalists, from scientists like Ed Wilson at Harvard to say, yes, the science is necessary but not sufficient for the changes we need to make for this planetary future. So it was an awareness that is now even more embedded in human consciousness, this eco-consciousness that you've both named, right? And it has many, many expressions. One of them is in the world's religions, and the good news is we were trying with the grace and direction of several people, including Syed Hussein Nas, one of the great Sufi scholars. He said to us, create a new field of study in academia. But we complemented that with a moral force in society. So there are now 30 graduate programs in religion and ecology because the next generation wants this integration. They want an integral ecology. As Elissa knows so well, they are starved for meaning and purpose and belonging and healing. So this integration, if we let it rise in its own way in academia, that's fresh and new. But it is already rising as a moral force with green faith and many, many people in the activist settings around the world, frankly. So that is terrific. And I'll just, maybe stop here because there's so much to say, and I want to hear Elissa's response. So this combination, as we've said in this moment, but in the other sessions, enlightenment isn't just about the self. Nirvana isn't for the self. That was the Bodhisattva vow. It's for all people and all sentient beings. So this combination of an eco-consciousness arising and re-arising and a fecundity, as Elissa said so beautifully, that I have goosebumps as I'm saying it. It regenerates us. We were just at a breakfast with an incredible Yale graduate. We're sitting next to these plants. We were referring to the energy of the plants at this little outdoor restaurant. So along with that, the regeneration of energy as an antidote to burnout goes also to the eco-justice issues, which in the next round, I keep saying I'll talk more about. Eco-spirituality, eco-justice. We are putting this together in phenomenal ways, and especially because this is what the next generation is longing for. I like to say this is a intergenerational handshake. And they love that for whatever reason. So, Elissa, over to you. I love this dialogue, this dance we're doing together.
Oh, I think we lost a little audio there, Elissa. And she's going to get that dialed up here.
Between the two of us, we are modeling the connections that we need to be made between the spiritual, religious, ecological world and the academic thinking, scientific world. I do feel that there is such a gap, and we are so siloed, and it really makes us, in a sense, so impotent and powerlessness. We have phenomenal science of nature, environment, climate change, and we also understand eco-anxiety, our understanding of the mind, of suffering, of mental health, and these don't move the needle. We are in a spiritual crisis. People, individuals, are locked into feeling isolation, disconnection, lack of purpose, nihilism, so meaninglessness of life when they look around and see such devastating news that is, the preferred news on any screen is of course only the bad news. And so this spiritual crisis includes a lack of compassionate action, a lack of a service mindset. And so people become siloed and small in their thinking. And we can't solve this without bringing in the spiritual wisdom and being surrounded and buoyed by that on a daily basis. So this question of how does contemplative inner work lead to outer action, I don't feel that it's a well-paved path, formula, protocol I can give someone, recommend to them. I feel like we have examples of lives and communities well lived. And part of that is the remembering every day of the miracle of life and our role, our responsibility to curate and care. And so that it's not one class, one teaching, one retreat, one experience. It really is this call to be in constant remembrance and spiritually and love motivated action. And so we're caught in, as Joanne Basis says, business as usual day, business as usual culture and society. And so I agree with Mary Evelyn that there is a very exciting movement globally and shift, and and we are all together as part of this tipping point. And so it's a very exciting time. And I live in a siloed world where we're using facts and information and science alone, and that won't lead to change. I'm actually here now in Sonoma. Nicole is partnered with me to allow me to be here and be part of a change that I'm trying to bring to the hostile culture of academia. I'm leading a group of researchers on a retreat, and there are several reasons why researchers particularly need this. It's not just because of burnout and uncertainty and the crazy changes in our ability to do science with funding, but that we need time and space to think. And the onslaught, this applies to all of us, the onslaught of information and screens and texts and emails, we are working at our lowest level of capacity, in a sense, as a species, because of how we've set up the way that we think or don't think. We think in small attention bites alone often. And so there was a paper in Nature recently that really was about human attention, how we need to protect it, and the importance of spaciousness and time to think for researchers to be able to actually see above the fray, to do transformative work. That means thinking together. That means, metacognition, creativity, imagination. All of these need to enter and be part of it. So for me to speak, Nicole came in and she's leading some practices to help bring, our group of academics into these mindsets that we hope to continue to meet up and foster together.
I point of personal privilege. So I have been an audience member with a number of occasions where Elissa and Nicole do this work, and it is remarkable. It is an absolute, I mean, they're just, aside from being just well suited as presenting partners, it's amazing to see this confluence of ideas in the sense that so much that traditionally comes from a very siloed particular mindset is actually brought out into practice and brought to bear on the experience of those who are participants in this workshop. Gives me hope that there's possibility, there's something there that can be expanded. I would say this as well, and there's a question here, I promise, but I do want to make a couple of comments about how certainly in my educational background, and I bet it's really strong for both of you, especially Elissa, but there's this idea that if you go to the deepest fundamentals about the nature of reality and what we think that is, right? We already, there's often this introduction of a really kind of a false binary, right? What I mean on this is that you tend to think the world is either subjective or objective at a broad level. And so, for example, if you are an objectivist, right, and you look at the world that way, it has to be observable, confirmable, empirical, or it doesn't really matter or exist, right? If you are subjective, then the experience part is what's really critical, and without that, you've got an issue. Then if you go, let's go down, well, not down, but to another level where we talk about the way we establish how we know things, right? And in that regard, there's often those who, again, think in a more experiential kind of interpretive way, that we set our meanings through an understanding of the world through how we interpret the world. And then there are those who think, nah, there's only a very specific method through which we can establish what we know and what capital T truth is, right? So this false binary has given rise to any of a number of other super problematic ways of living and thinking. That being the case, I'm still very hopeful and very enthusiastic and in great belief that we can overcome some of this. And I think when we talk about and use words like interconnection and the notion of a broader way to look at things and to build a confluence and congruence of ideas that maybe foreground cooperation over competition, for example, that we may be onto something here. So, Mary Evelyn, I'm going to turn it back to you. I mean, that's a lot there, but how do you see maybe we can advance beyond some of these false binaries and some of these, intrinsic meta narratives that have limited the way we think about the world and about ourselves and about nature?
Well, thank you, David, for the question, the question, because I think we inherited from the Enlightenment era a lot of positive things, but we certainly inherited from the scientific era as well a very binary viewpoint. But if we could spend time talking historically. The early scientists were not binary. They had a tremendous sense of spirituality and religion, many of them. So we do need to see this historically as a division, which is part of modernity. Yeah. And there's been much literature on this. So as I say, it's hugely important. Why? Because as David is pointing out, I think this is the fundamental problematique and why this conference is so important, namely the division, we could put it between science and spirituality, between ecology and ethics, which we're trying to bring back together. But the division between the objectification of nature and the world, and I think, well, you could say an extreme subjectivity, as David's outlined, is the problem. I mean, we've been at so many of these major universities, Harvard and Yale and Columbia and Berkeley and Princeton. The division between science as the way of knowing and everything else as secondary. Engineering, of course, has a priority too. STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, is the way of going. The liberal arts are almost disappearing at great risk to our future health and the health of the planet. The seminaries in these places, like Harvard and Yale, are very secondary to the major faculty of arts and sciences. there's a distance, which I can describe in many, many ways. But the division, so I'm at a science-based School of the Environment, 125 years old. Most of our major environmentalists have come out of this place. But science reigns as the solution. Humans were not even part of the curriculum until a few years ago, seriously. And environmental justice, 2 years, 3 years maybe. This is so deep because if these universities put forward this division, it creates a division in our students. I use this word very lightly with great respect, but there's a schizophrenia because they cannot integrate their scientific training, and that's true for all the universities except religiously based universities. They can't integrate a scientific understanding of evolution with how we belong here. So literally, because the scientists will teach it by and large as a process that's random, purposeless, absolutely no meaning. There's no telos, larger purpose. Have a nice day. Seriously, it is the most profound division of where we belong and why. And yet, theologians and others who don't always appreciate all the science, although that's getting better, but they would have been saying, it's all purpose, it's all telos, it's all creation, it's God, etc., this biblical language, whatever. These are two extremes, I would say. And it's why an integration, integral ecology, cosmic ecological consciousness, a yin-yang sensibility, the traditions of East Asia, I'll talk about soon, and integration. Of course there's randomness in evolutionary process. Of course there's randomness in our own life and uncertainty. But there's also mysterious, purposeful, self-organizing processes and properties in nature and in our own life. That's the beauty. That's the creativity. That's the excitement. It's not like we're going to find our way, our journey perfectly. We're negotiating, we're navigating. That's why Elissa's work is so fecund with potentiality. And even this breakdown moment is causing the most radical transition of our consciousness as part of these processes. That's the spiritual, eco-spiritual direction. Okay. Elissa, please go ahead.
Yes. Oh, I couldn't agree more. Okay, so I'm going to bring Joanna Macy, summon her spirit. I know she's already with us. So I couldn't agree more. There's the way that we teach science leads to an impassionate response to the content. Given the threat embedded in ecological science, the crisis, the losses, it brings in a deadening of the spirit or clinical distress. I mean, part of how I got into this, I asked, what research am I going to do? You know, how can I help enter this world on fire? I know how to do research. Let's all get together and see what we can do together that's bigger than what we do alone. So my colleagues and I gathered a force of environmental researchers, public health researchers, mental health researchers, and said, what are we doing here in California? We can barely breathe several times a year. Our students are, so coming in as freshmen with depression and anxiety. And the answer was not research. The answer was, I'm feeling such sadness and climate distress myself. Students are coming to me. They're getting more depressed after a class, not less. And I don't know how to hold their emotions and help activate them. And so the common plea was, we need skills to deal with this. We need a new mindset. We need community. And so this is what we've created, is a community of teachers to be learning and practicing together the spiritual and courageous practices mindsets, wisdom. We need each other. We can't do this alone. And then we bring this to the children. So we model it in our community of elders, in a sense. And then we are better able to be present for experiential education for them. So academic education is great for learning facts and history and even critiquing it, but it doesn't lead to a deeper understanding of how we as a being, an animal, relate to the information, how we're connected. The interconnection that we've been talking about in this conference, the ecological interconnection is not something we can teach. We can read about it. It's interesting intellectually, but it's in community, in experience, in spiritual experience that we know it deeply. And so our class is, for example, experiential. Yes, there's readings and videos for the academic part, but when we get together in person, which is so precious these days, it's not an online class, we are in small, safe groups to process and discuss and share how we're responding to all of the information about climate change, how social change happens, what we can do. And it's in these small groups and in the sharing that transformation takes place. Without that, we are staying in our reflective information processing mode that is not integrative, that is not accounting for our emotions. It's deadening our emotions. It's not leading to community and change. So we need the contemplative education, the contemplative pedagogy, and not just in a climate class. We need it in every class. We have, many of us in this field have a vision of all teachers getting to start out with some practice. Doesn't have to, meditation is great, but any practice to help bring social solidarity, cohesion, and get us in our highest mind state. So a quote by Joanna Macy, I think is appropriate here to this question of how we prevent the numbing and avoidance and deadening, and instead bring people to connection, interconnection, earth connection. Joanna said, of all the dangers we face, from climate chaos to nuclear war, none is so great as the deadening of our response.
Yeah, I love that. I so agree. The challenge of 50 years of teaching in secular academia is beyond what we can imagine. And that, I mean, if I did not use the word spiritual in a public talk at the School of the Environment until my final talk in a public setting, I would even not use the word ethics, barely. So the challenge is beyond belief. So we have to realize, and if I said, let's do, first of all, I love the sense of practice. Journey of the universe, there's a cosmic walk that Genesis Farm, Sister Miriam McGillis developed, Sam King is using it. All of these experiential things are things we do generally outside of academia. We say 1 foot in academia, 1 foot outside. But that's why all these practices and ideas that are part of this weekend and Elissa leading are essential. I do want to just say that 2 points to supplement or complement what Elissa just said. Multiple ways of knowing are critical, and we must advocate for this, that science, especially with an empirical way of knowing, when empiricism, objectifying the world, and especially nature, becomes a worldview, we have a problem. And that's why we see an empirical method as important for scientific research, but not as a worldview. We've got to make that distinction. And then we can also say many worldviews have informed our human journey. Of course, native traditions, which are finally being taken seriously, traditional environmental knowledge. So at our School of the Environment, which just celebrated 125 years, founded by Gifford Pinchot to restore our forests in this country, last year they had traditional environmental native peoples from all over North America in an online program to say forest management should not just be empirical, reductionistic, and profit-based. Let's hear from people who've been managing their forests for a long, long time. Thousands of people listen to these. They're all recorded and so on. That's a breakthrough for academia to acknowledge multiple ways of knowing, including the arts, writing, etc. We did one webinar with Robin Kimmerer, David Haskell, Song of Trees, Robert McFarlane, The Rivers Are Alive. 4,000 people came onto this. It was the largest webinar that had ever been done at Yale. So this is what's on the horizon. Yeah. We have to advocate for multiple ways of knowing, for the deep, deep search of people's in academia and outside for that which will fulfill an integrated ecology. And I want to say, to complement the experimental, wonderful practices, if we also say ecology as it emerged with the Odum brothers, O-D-U-M, down at the University of Georgia, they were all about a holistic worldview, you see. So ecology arose as a complement to a different form of understanding ecosystems as whole systems. So we can also advocate in that direction and complement the practices. In other words, the knowledge base we want to bring forward is holism, is integration, is participation. So we can do both, the knowledge of ecology and the practices that it is now inducing for healing, which we need.
Yeah, this is phenomenal. One of the things I've noticed, and I'll borrow from the Academy, but leave it quickly, hopefully, is that one of the pendulum shifts that I'm starting to see a little bit of is that even in my lifetime, when I started my career, if you were interested in general education for undergraduates, that was the bottom of the totem pole, man. You were not happening, and frankly, it took it was either graduate assistants or folks who didn't have enough teaching load or whatever. I mean, these courses were taught by people who generally didn't necessarily want to or had to for some reason. There's a lot of this. Nonetheless, and of course, there's this tremendous specialization that the Academy tends to really require of faculty and of its practitioners, which in a way also sidelines some of what happens in general education. So what I'm seeing happen though, and what really resonating with me is this idea of a holistic understanding of an integrative way of being. Because if you look at many, and I'm going to defer to obviously to both of you on this in a moment, but if you look at a lot of different ways of self-actualization or psychological ways of understanding the individual as they progress through life, there is this trend toward integration, towards self-actualization, perhaps. I'm thinking of like Maslow's work. Also, when we think about taxonomies of learning and how educational research looks at all this, the top of that process in the educational journey is integration. It's synthesis. It's creation, which requires enough mastery of the steps to get there that it is a creative act, right? Okay. So this being said, I'm involved in a project now that's called The Seventh Skill. And we used to really integrate or sort of disentangle these skills. And I have a little acrostic I'm using now that is often, while quixotic, I can experience enlightenment. I can bring forward this way of thinking. And that acrostic is this. We tend to think of skills as oral communication and written communication. When I say skills, what you really need to have and know to be considered educated. Then you get to information literacy, which is the judgment of the quality of information and how it works. Critical thinking is something we throw around a lot, which I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say what that means because it's very contextual to who's using the term, but some notion that there's a way to understand and order reality that is effective and useful and important, right? And of course, some notion of quantitative literacy, of numeracy, of being able. So those five are sort of the basic. And a lot of schools and colleges will organize an undergrad curriculum to some extent around them. What it doesn't have in it are the E and the A. And that's the expanding awareness bit in my little acrostic. E is ethics. I think you can't get around something a holistic understanding without understanding the ethical dimension. I'm so also very glad and heartened to hear the description of an ethical notion of ecological justice and ecological being. Then the A, in my view, is aesthetics. And so there is nothing greater in terms of the pinnacle of experience than having an aesthetic experience. And I'm using that in a broad context, meaning not just music or art or some appreciation of beauty, but the goosebumps, the experience that comes from being truly aesthetically transformed in your experience of something. It's happening to me right now. I mean, I'm going off on the goosebumps just being a part of this conversation. So if you'll permit, I'm sorry for such a long buildup. But what do each of you see as potential for that integrative, for that larger sense of meaning and being? How might we see that happen? And let's just go beyond the academy a bit. Are there ways and things that you're seeing that might allow us to move this into broader communal and community practice? And please, Mary Evelyn, we'll just keep with our order that we've been using here.
Well, great questions, great point. As I think Elissa and I know, the importance does lie with the educational world and transforming it in a lot of ways. I've just put some resources up there, on Journey of the Universe, which I think it has a great presence in both academia and outside of academia, I have to say. And I don't know if this is the right point to say, we've been doing work in China since 1985 because my area of study is Confucianism and the traditions of East Asia, and I lived in Japan for 2 years and traveled extensively through Asia in the 1973, 74, in part because of my disillusion with the 60s. So I want to just make maybe two responses. Of course, ethics and aesthetics for sure, and there's no question, which is why we made a film outside of academia to engage. So let me say, the film is trying to bring together cosmos, earth, and human. This little character is for the heavens, the cosmos, earth, and human as one unfolding process. That is Confucian Taoist cosmology, profound. And that is also the worldview of Journey of the Universe. So when we show it in China, and the first time we showed it before COVID, 700,000 people watched it. They can identify their holistic worldview. When Brian, the narrator and our co-creator and writer and scientist and Native American, his father's from British Columbia, Salish peoples, when he gets onto the boat at the end in the waters around Samos and says, "We are the mind and heart of heaven and earth." That is Confucian. That is Taoist. That is holism on a scale almost incomparable in the other world's religions. These are traditions that have influenced more people over time than any other tradition because they're 5,000 years old. It's a 5,000-year-old civilization. These traditions are not all 5,000 years old, but that sensibility that we are actually, the most famous saying in Confucianism is, "Heaven is my father, earth is my mother, even such a small creature as I has a place in their midst." And it goes on. It's a filiality that we are birthed out of these processes. Anytime we say it in China, in universities or eco-cultural centers or organic farms, people know that saying. You say, so here is almost a third of the world's peoples who are moving in this direction. They've translated Journey, the book and the film and the online classes into Chinese. So I take this as exceedingly positive, and all these resources will simply complement, add to the extraordinary practices that Elissa and Nicole and others are doing. It's the small self and the large self. And as Elissa says, it opens we can breathe, we can feel, we belong. And we all have goosebumps when we say that. Elissa, over to you again.
Wow. That's so beautiful, Mary Evelyn. I'm going to go back to goosebumps. So David, social ethics are so incredibly important to infuse in the foundation of everything we do, and then beauty and aesthetics. And so when we think of active hope, it's not based on facts, although there are plenty of hopeful facts when we hear the wise leaders like Catherine Hayhoe, Christiana Figueres. There is so much reason for optimism right now. We are in the midst of a phenomenal shift towards solar energy, not necessarily in the US, but in other countries like Pakistan. I mean, these are economically driven changes because it's so much, it's helping the economy of some of these lower income countries so much that this is a wave we cannot stop. This is beautiful and exciting. That's not on the forefront of anyone's mind, right? It's rather the doom, gloom, apocalypse is coming, so let's deaden and look away and distract. And so, David, back to the goosebumps. And Mary, the Taoism being that we are the soul of the earth and the sky. That is the missing ingredient to bring us active hope. Joanna Macy says active hope is waking up to the beauty of life, on whose behalf we can act. We belong to this world. Yeah. That is all completely spiritual, experiential, as well as some science could bolster that and be behind that. But that's a wave of spiritual transformation that we will never forget, and we need to keep creating it. We need to keep in these active communities. So I think maybe this is Taoist, Mary. We are the nervous system of the earth. We are and should be filled with eco-anxiety, motivational eco-anxiety, because of the danger that we have created and that we are in. And that is part of our movement from inner to outer. Yeah. Is the only way to work with this anxiety is to be naming it and to be facing the grief and to be using that as our fuel, that and joy as our fuel to be working together. So I want to just bring one more comment on social ethics, and then this question of what is sacred community, what is this living community on earth that we talking about, but we actually need to be in more. So let's just go right to this idea of community. I would like to better understand what this looks like. We can all imagine, an imagination and image and beautiful pictures of what our future could be are very important, but what is the step in front of us? So Joanna Macy did develop this beautiful workshop methodology. It is about groups. And so what is this sacred community and workshop methodology? Mary Evelyn, in your view, and throughout this conference, we've been talking about love and community as the only way out. I loved the quote earlier, we must go through this, and we must go through it together as the only way through it. But I feel like we don't have enough of a model. And what I was going to say about understanding this motivational drive to help heal and curate and protect nature is not something that is taught. Of course, it is in some traditions and in indigenous traditions. I just had the honor of spending time with Paul Ekman and Eve Ekman, his daughter. And Paul is in his last days of life. And he spent his life understanding human emotions, actually emotions in general. He traveled cross-culturally and helped us understand the universality of some emotions and how they manifest in our expression and our face, and met His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and then devoted his work to understanding compassion. What is global compassion? And so I asked Paul, what is the one thing that you wish most for all of this knowledge that you have helped us create to understand the human mind and motivation and emotion? And his answer was very simple. It was, we need to teach kids the purpose in life, and that is compassionate action. We don't teach them that.
Yeah, for sure. Beautiful. And I absolutely love, of course, Joanna Macy, and what a warrior, human being, activist, and empowerer she was and still is. So thank you for all those references. And she was deeply influenced by Thomas Berry and Brian
Yes.
Simon, as you know. So I want to complement and continue what you've just mentioned by also adding something about the Confucian sensibility, which is, and this is why it had such an appeal. I started studying Buddhism in Japan, and I had the most incredible Buddhist teachers, and that continued when I returned from Asia, and they would come to every university that we taught at. We had a leader of the Rinzai sect of Buddhism come and teach Buddhism. And he was incredible. And he did the calligraphy, so we had the art forms and so on for students to witness, as well as meditation. But the tradition that really I picked up on even deeper, as did Thomas Berry and his close friend De Berry, is Confucianism. Why? Because from the very beginning, knowledge and action are one. Self-cultivation is for the common good. The scholar official is a civil servant for the society at large. These ideals are incredible, but it's why it is the oldest continuing civilization in the world, and why the Enlightenment thinkers were deeply influenced by what they would call Confucian sensibilities, Confucian humanism, etc. But for our times, going back to your work and things that people are doing, it's because their worldview is infused with qi, with a sense that everything is alive and that spirit and matter are one thing, which is what Teilhard de Chardin said in the evolutionary process, which is what Thomas Berry said, deeply influenced by Confucianism. So qi is something we can cultivate because it's all around us. And that's why Qigong, the practices of qi, including Tai Chi. I do Qigong every week on a group 2 online. But the traditional Chinese medicine, I have shiatsu done to keep the acupuncture points open and flowing. And we have access to all of this for our healing. It's a healing of the qi in us and outside of us. This is fantastic that these traditions, as well as traditions from Indian medicines, India, etc., are available to us. So, and by the way, the beautiful references to love throughout this weekend, and what you've just said beautifully, Elissa, here's what I truly love. In Confucianism, the virtue of the human is humaneness, which is a fantastically rich, deep sense of love. And it means the person in relationality. That's what the character means. But it is not only a personal virtue to cultivate in society, and this is how the concentric circles work. The human is part of the family, the society, friends, the political order, the natural order, and the cosmos, with no separation, no transcendence. So cultivating this sense of qi, the microcosm of the macrocosm, as you cultivate virtue, it resonates with what they call the virtue of the universe. There's this fecundity in the universe, which is love. Thomas Berry spoke about it as gravity, etc. So you see, as over and over saying, it's not cultivating for yourself, it's cultivating for the whole.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yes.
To me, it's so empowering. I think about it every day. And maybe in the next round, I'll talk about Living Earth Community as Beth.
Oh, please do. And along those lines, in the meantime, I'm so grateful to be in community right now with all of you. And I am curious. I've talked about building a community within a classroom and within an institution, and that's what I know. I think I'm just so curious. What is your community? What are your communities? When do you feel you're in sacred community? What is it called? Is it virtual? Is it in person? I would love a chat in from all these amazing listeners who have been thinking about these issues.
Absolutely. And I just want to underscore that the chat is there. Please respond to that. It'd be wonderful. We're saving this information. We will be putting out a summary, some documentation references that cover all of the sessions of this conference. So we want to make sure nobody loses a reference to anything or an idea or a book or a person or anything. So please know that we're recording all this for the purposes of bringing it back out to you. And with that said, I would love to hear more about this notion of community from all of you, but also Mary Evelyn, if you would talk about the Living Earth community a bit, that'd be great. And then we'll do some Q&A if that's okay with the two of you.
Absolutely.
Great.
Thank you. I'm so energized, Elissa, and I really am very moved. And that's my community, is being in dialogue with, relationship with extraordinary people. Really.
Me too. It's so important. And I feel deadened when it's been a long time since I've been connected to this dialogue or, retreats or teachers. I just, so easy to become drained.
Yeah.
Yes.
And uninspired.
Yeah. Well, and John Grimm, of course, my partner and husband and co-worker and friend and lover, is a great inspiration. So I wanted to share something we just released last month, because I think it responds in part to Elissa's and David's questions. We've been working for many, many years on this notion of a living earth community, which I think everybody here understands, has experienced, and we all want more of. And it's cosmological and ecological. It's human and nature, mutually enhancing. So when we went to China last year, we asked some of our post-grad students, how about if you start to collect the information that's out there on the internet of this living earth community, etc. When we got back, they had 75 pages of work from science and ecology and nature writers, etc. It's exploding around the planet, right? That this is a living earth community. Of course, it's the Gaia hypothesis, but it's more specifically, and this is where we can work with what Elissa's doing, what many of you are doing, with practices that awaken this for all of us. So let me describe. It's a knowledge commons to simply affirm what's some of our deepest intuitions in a way that we can all draw on this and add to it. So please feel free to do that with Tyler Nelson, who's the outreach person for it. So it's 3 parts. The first one is the intelligences of nature that I mentioned quickly. We all know, Suzanne Simard, the roots of trees and fungi and soil, interconnected, communicating. The tremendous work of musicians like Paul Winter, who are playing with the wolves and wolf song, with bird song, and he's bringing that into our consciousness. And now the studies are quite extraordinary about the communication in the natural world. Here at I'm in New York near NYU. At NYU last spring, there was a 3-day conference with scientists saying that animals and birds and fish that they study, of course they're sentient. We like to talk about differentiated sentience. Thomas Berry would say every creature has its own way of knowing and participating. So they had a conference, 3 days. At the end, they said, of course, these beautiful, complex creatures are sentient in different ways, have feeling in different ways. Therefore, they issued a manifesto. If that's the case, we must protect them. this is a whole new call for biodiversity protection, which we need, because scientists do not usually advocate. They study, they do objective empirical studies, data, charts, graphs. This is a breakthrough. I said, okay, scientists are breaking through for us and with us. Let's do this knowledge commons. The middle section is, again, present in all of this group on this weekend. The responses of humans around the world for the last several decades that builds on indigenous ways of knowing, traditional environmental knowledge, and so on, but in different forms, like deep ecology of Arnie Ness, of religious naturalism, people like Ursula Goodenough writing The Sacred and Dimensions of Nature, pantheism, panentheism, animism, all these different responses which are so rich and diversified. It's like this big community you want to hug and say, go for it. And the third part is, okay, differentiated sentience, complexity, awe, wonder, beauty evoked, responses of the human community in its varied forms. And then thirdly, what is the action? From the awe to the action. So the third part is earth law, earth jurisprudence, which Thomas Berry helped develop in one of his last gifts of his later years of his life, and rights of nature. The river in New Zealand that's been protected as personhood. We just had one of the Maori at Yale deliver the consciousness that takes to bring this forward. And the Maori are leading the way, but many parts of the world, there are these cases of rights of nature. And Thomas Berry used to say, we invented the idea of rights and gave them all to the human. So this area of earth law, earth jurisprudence, and rights of nature is exploding. And NYU has a whole center of it. We're having a big conference on it this coming week at Yale. People are leading on it. So it's not just an aspiration. It is an inspiration in praxis now. So I hope you'll enjoy looking at Living Earth Community. Please give us feedback, give us things that might be missing. And we just hope it will inspire the work that's already in motion and further to be expanded.
Folks, we have the individual agency controls enabled on Zoom. So if you just raise your hand and then and I'll acknowledge you and you can unmute and ask a question. I wanted to stick that in there really quickly before I say thank you to Mary Evelyn for that amazing description of the work, and Elissa for all of your descriptions of your work, and to both of you for being a part of this. It's really just, this whole thing has been a gift, this whole conference, and thanks to Angel Acosta and Nicole Chase and Steve Varley at Garrison and all of my fellows that I am so glad to count myself among. With that being said, if anybody has a question, there we go. Let's see if we've got, I'm not seeing any hands yet, so you'll have to hear from me until we get a brave person to ask a question.
One person is asking about eco-justice.
Oh, please, yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, because I kept saying I would speak about it. So our website, which includes the Forum on Religion and Ecology, includes all the world's religions, what they're doing, their ideas, the books that are coming out to change the theologies, but also the practices, which is engaged projects. So on the website, hundreds of engaged projects in the Christianity section and so on. But eco-justice, as Chelsea, I'm sure, and others know, actually came out in the U.S. context, in North America, with African American communities in North Carolina, where their roads were going to be covered with toxic waste. And the African American communities, led by African American women, did protests to stop this. It wasn't all successful, but it started the environmental justice movement, which was led by Ben Chavis, a minister, was followed up by Robert Bullard and many others. They had a conference and developed the 17 principles of environmental justice. You take Flint, Michigan, the water crisis, that's environmental justice. You take Louisiana, Cancer Alley, with all the oil refineries there and the tremendous amounts of cancer. You take what's happening right now in AI sites for more energy. They're being cited in African American and minority communities across this country. You take Native Americans, environmental justice, you don't even have to say anything more. So on our website, there's more information about this and some case studies. But I think it's along with eco-spirituality, which renews us and grounds us, this empowers us. The eco-justice movement empowers us for the action. And Laudato Si, Francis's encyclical, put this together in the most powerful way with Cry of the Earth, Cry of the Poor. This is a human and an earth challenge for all of us. And that is exceedingly positive in the siloed academic community and why Laudato Si has had such traction. So thank you for that question. And there's a series at Orbis on ecology and justice, Orbis Books, which that book, Cry of the Earth, Cry of the Poor, was published in 1997. So it's been around for a while. Lots more to do on this topic. Thank you, Chelsea.
We've got one from Mary Hart, who I'm going to ask the question on her behalf here. She can't come on camera today. Her question: how to include the vast weaponized, imperialist, materialist, patriarchal nation-state structures and economies of modernity? I'm going to not answer it direct, or I'm going to certainly pass this on to Elissa and Mary Evelyn. But I would say this, on the basis of what I'm inspired to understand today. What if you took each of those terms, and let's read them almost like a textual postmodernist might look at this and think of power. And what about the antonym of each of those words? Let's take the antonym of each of those words and then think about how the antonym of those words can be built into a sense of community and cooperation. So, for example, if we talked about a vast weaponized, well, how about a vast cooperative, loving, caring, collaborative, imperialist, materialist? How about more indigenous and spiritual? Patriarchal nation state. How about a matrilineal understanding of natural flow and activity? Structures and economies of modernity. How about structures and economies of postmodernity, as we might think of ecological justice and connection? That's my stab. Elissa, Mary Evelyn, anything you want to add to that?
I love it. Elissa, you go ahead. I love what you said, David. Beautiful. Your sound.
Marie or Mary, I'm overwhelmed just reading all of those words all together. You know, the structural forces of binational economic pressures, et cetera. So I thank you for asking that. We are really in such dark times and hopeful times. And from my view of how do we motivate together as people to be change makers, I do think of stress and trauma and despair and hopelessness as also the enemy, you know, the list of the enemies. And that when we can understand that the economic and capitalist and repressive authoritarian forces want us to feel that way. They want us to feel fear and immobilization and freeze and giving in. And so that understanding of the trauma response and how it does lead to immobilization and freeze is empowering, it should help us speak up in all ways that we can together, to be calling out the good actions, to be part of the good actions, to be extremely empowered and effective in our micro local environments, and then stretching that out to as much as we can of showing human change, human goodness in these ways that we can control. So we cannot control the global economic forces right now, but we can create models of change, and we can fight them in our own ways. So, you know, local is global is a construct that we are often repeating to our students, and in their essays, they end the class with saying, I understand it matters what I do here now in my community as a human. I can share it out on my Instagram video. These are what give us hope and the steps of change right now.
It's beautiful. Just quickly, I want to affirm thank you, Elissa. Rhonda's point that she's saying at the United Nations, this binary between human rights and nature rights, with the rights to a sustainable future is being understood. I think all of this is happening in our time. And I would respond to this in the same ways you both have beautifully responded, so I won't even, I would say though, these structures that Mari has identified, this is what's breaking down.
Right.
This is what's impossible to sustain. And it takes time, but it's a breakdown to break through.
Yeah.
Our mutual suffering around the planet in this point of breakdown is to say, we can do this. This is the greatest strength of humans, is our human energy with our spiritual energy, with our sense of equity energy and justice energy. That confluence is unstoppable. And I want to conclude with its most unstoppable revelatory moment. I am here in New York with Zoran Mondami's victory in New York, where people around the world were watching. 100,000 volunteers have made this possible, and it's one of the most hopeful breakthroughs of our moment. We can build on that. We will build on this extraordinary conference. And thank you, David, as a marvelous moderator, and Elissa as a friend and colleague.
Oh, it's been such an honor, just incredible. And I'll end echoing some speakers and participants. Obstacles are our wings. Thank you, Mary Evelyn.
I love it.
Persevere no matter what.
Thanks to all of you. If you would please give some special appreciation to Mary Evelyn and to Elissa. Thank you so much for being here. I have to close on something I saw on the internet last night that's making its rounds, and I think it's apropos. Taught my kids today how socialism works. Let them trick or treat while I stayed home, then took all their candy. Socialism 101. The socialism part is where the community came together and fed your kids for free. The capitalism part is where you made them do all the work and stole from them. So that's a really politically charged idea, but I think if we can take some of the political charge out of it and think in a more community-oriented way. I have learned so much from both of you and from everybody along this conference. Thank you so much.
And David, likewise, you are amazing. It's been amazing to teach with you too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
In
our various retreat formats, you are so wise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.